Last episode, we laid out the Lazar narrative in full. 9 extraterrestrial craft at secret base S4, fueled by element 115, the sport model, a propulsion system built on physics that the rest of the scientific world hadn't caught up to yet. This episode, we're going to set all of that aside. Because before we can evaluate what Bob Lazar says he saw, we have to figure out who Bob Lazar is. And that turns out to be a far more complicated question than either his supporters or his critics want to admit. Bob Lazar says he has a master's degree in physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His thesis topic, he says, was magnetohydrodynamics. He also claims to have a master's degree in electronics from Caltech. He says he worked as a physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory before being recruited to S4. These are the credentials that, in his own telling, explain why he was selected for the reverse engineering program. And they are credentials that have never been verified. MIT has no record of a Robert Lazar as a student. Caltech has no record of a Robert Lazar as a student. His employment at Los Alamos is more complicated, and we'll get to it. Now, before you file this under case closed, he's a fraud, I need you to remember what we established last episode. We are running an analysis of competing hypotheses. The absence of a record is evidence. It is not proof. And in this particular case, the absence of a record is exactly what you would expect if the whistleblower hypothesis is true. If Lazar's identity was deliberately scrubbed by an agency with the capability and the motive to do so. The question ACH forces us to ask is not, does this fit the story? The question is, which hypotheses does this evidence discriminate between? And credential erasure, either genuine academic records that were scrubbed, or academic records that were never created because the degrees were fabricated, looks identical on the surface. That's what makes it such a poor diagnostic item. Both the whistleblower hypothesis and the fabricator hypothesis predict exactly the same documentary record. So let's go deeper. George Knapp tried to verify the Lazar story, and some of what he found is genuinely interesting. First, the Los Alamos phone directory. Knapp obtained a 1982 Los Alamos internal phone directory and found Robert Lazar listed. But the detail that matters is what appears after his name. Researcher Stanton Friedman analyzed the directory and noted that the designation following Lazar's entry reads K/M, indicating Kirk Mayer, a subcontractor, not Los Alamos National Laboratory itself. Friedman's take was that Lazar was likely a technician working at Los Alamos through Kirk Mayer, not a staff physicist employed by Los Alamos National Laboratory. We also now have a primary source document that settles this definitively. In March 1990, Lazar himself wrote to Los Alamos requesting his personnel file, describing himself as having been employed as a physicist there. Los Alamos responded in a formal letter dated April 6, 1990. The letter states that they were unsuccessful in locating any laboratory personnel or medical records pertaining to Lazar, but their security records indicate he was issued a Z number, 094729, on May 18, 1982, for Kirk Mayer, and that the 1982 directory listed Lazar as a Kirk Mayer employee. Z numbers at Los Alamos denoted contractor access, not staff employment. Los Alamos directed Lazar to contact Kirk Mayer directly for further information. This is not an absence of records. It is an institutional response on letterhead, signed, with a specific badge number and a precise start date. The Kirk Mayer subcontractor status is now documented fact, not inference. What the directory and the Los Alamos letter together establish is that Lazar had some association with Los Alamos, real but peripheral as a contractor's technician. The Los Alamos physicist's claim does not survive contact with the documentary record. That is analytically significant. But it does not settle the S4 question, because a subcontractor technician with real access to a classified facility is still a person who could have encountered something. The credential fabrication and the S4 account are separable claims. We need to keep them that way. Second, Lazar produced a 1989 W-2 bearing the employer name United States Department of Naval Intelligence, an agency which doesn't exist. The real agency is the Office of Naval Intelligence. The document also carries a Washington, D.C. zip code, an employer identification number, and a control number ending in the letters MAJ. At a 1993 UFO seminar, Lazar confirmed that MAJ also appeared on his S4 security badge, and that he was told it stood for Majestic, the clearance designation for the reverse engineering program. For viewers who are not aware, the word Majestic is well known in the UFO community, associated with the Majestic 12 group, an alleged cabal of government insiders who have been protecting the UFO secret since 1947. It doesn't verify Majestic was real, but it does establish the designation was part of Lazar's story from the beginning. The wrong agency name on the W-2 cuts both ways. A genuine black program would use a real cover employer, something like EG&G, not an invented agency name. Whereas a fabricator who didn't know the correct name would produce exactly this. So would a disinformation operation designed to sound official but remain unverifiable. Both explanations fit the same document. Lazar's paychecks carried the same non-existent agency name. Two documents, same error. That consistency also works in either direction. Genuine documents would match, but so would fabrications built from the same source. On May 15, 1989, Lazar appeared on KLAS TV Las Vegas, with his face hidden and his identity concealed under the pseudonym Dennis. The interview happened because George Knapp's scheduled guest canceled. Knapp called John Lear, who put him onto Lazar. However, Knapp was already investigating UFO reports at Area 51 from military sources before he met Lazar. Lazar walked into an existing investigation, not the other way around. The broadcast date is important as Element 115 and the gravity propulsion model appeared genuinely novel for 1989. But were they? We will examine that angle in Episode 3. Let's spend some time on the education question. MIT and Caltech have no record of Lazar. The simple conclusion is that he lied. But it's more layered than that. Researcher Stanton Friedman confirmed that Lazar did attend Pierce Junior College. That checks out. What doesn't check out are the master's degrees. Friedman found no record of Lazar having attended any course at MIT, not just no degree, but no attendance at all. The community college attendance is real. The MIT and Caltech attendance and conferred degrees are not documented anywhere. Lazar's pre-sentence report from his pandering case adds a further problem. It records his claimed educational history as a bachelor's degree from Pacifica University in 1978, an MIT master's in 1982, and a Caltech master's in 1985. Pacifica University was a diploma mill, shut down for selling credentials without providing education. That's not a mistake at the margins. That's a lie built into the core of the story. The claimed 1982 MIT date is suspect for a different reason. The Los Alamos personnel letter places his Kirk-Meyer contractor start date at May 18, 1982. A Los Alamos Monitor article on Lazar reported around the same time that he had recently moved to Los Alamos from California, not from Massachusetts. It is a sequence that has never been explained, and Lazar has never provided dates precise enough to account for it. The same pre-sentence report records that when interviewed on July 11, 1990, Lazar could produce his high school certificate, but nothing else. The court officer's observation that the defendant was evasive in supplying any types of dates concerning his educational background is a contemporaneous legal record, not a journalist's inference. Two further gaps. Lazar says his MIT thesis was on magnetohydrodynamics. No such thesis has ever been found. And in 35 years, not one faculty member or former classmate from MIT or Caltech has come forward publicly to corroborate his claims. Graduate programs are small. People remember who was there. Nobody remembers Lazar. At a 1993 UFO seminar, Lazar named two professors, Hosefield at MIT and Duxler at Caltech. Neither checks out. No faculty member named Hosefield appears in MIT directories back to 1980. The only Duxler in national faculty records is a William Duxler, director of computing at Pierce College, the community college Lazar actually attended. A Hosefield doesn't turn up at MIT, but a Frederick Hosefield turns up as a vocational instructor at Lazar's high school. These aren't missing records. They're verifiable misattributions. He named real people. They just taught at his community college and his high school, not at MIT and Caltech. Another sequencing problem, Lazar's pre-sentence report places the degrees in this order: Pacifica, 1978, MIT, 1982, Caltech, 1985. At a 1993 UFO seminar, Lazar placed Caltech before MIT, the opposite. Even if the pre-sentence report had the wrong sequence, and Lazar gave the correct sequence, the 1981 to 82 Caltech catalog closes off every master's degree pathway. Graduate admission required a bachelor's degree equivalent to one of Caltech's own programs. A diploma mill certificate wouldn't qualify. Lazar supporters believe that Lazar's non-existent graduate records are due to nefarious scrubbing by outside forces. But the government erased him argument has a problem. Removing records from two private universities would require removing paper records, microfilm archives, yearbook entries, professor recollections, classmate memories, and financial aid documentation. That's an extraordinary claim. Lazar has had 35 years to definitively clear up these education discrepancies by providing copies of acceptance letters or conferred diplomas, or the names of college acquaintances and real faculty members, but he never has. That absence of data can't be blamed on an outside entity. So what do we actually have? A man who was at Los Alamos in some capacity. A man whose 1989 technical claims showed genuine familiarity with physics. A man whose graduate credentials cannot be verified anywhere. A man who named his community college instructor as his Caltech professor and his high school vocational instructor as his MIT professor. A man convicted of pandering. None of this proves he's lying about S4. None of it proves he's telling the truth. What it establishes is that Robert Lazar is a complicated man whose relationship with the truth is not straightforward, which in an intelligence context makes him exactly the kind of source you handle with extreme care. Let's partially update our ACH matrix so you understand how the scoring works. We have three hypotheses on the table. We've looked at three key pieces of evidence: the Los Alamos phone directory, along with the Los Alamos personnel letter, Lazar's W-2, and the absence of graduate degrees. The phone directory is consistent with all three hypotheses. If Lazar is a genuine whistleblower, he'd be in that directory. If he fabricated his story, but had real peripheral employment at Los Alamos, he'd be in that directory. If he was used in a disinformation operation, he would need a real institutional footprint, so he'd be in that directory. This is not diagnostic, so we'll move on. Let's take a look at the W-2. Real employment under a classified entity would still produce a real paycheck document. The W-2 doesn't support the whistleblower hypothesis because the agency doesn't exist. A genuine black program would use a real cover employer like EG&G, not an invented agency name. But a fabricator who didn't know the correct agency name would produce exactly this. On the other hand, a disinformation campaign could fake the name to foil FOIA requests. We score this as inconsistent with whistleblower, consistent with fabricator, and consistent with disinformation. Looking at the credentials evidence, Stanton Friedman found no record of Lazar attending a single class at MIT. Not a missing degree, no attendance at all. The two graduate professors Lazar named turned out to be his high school vocational teacher and his community college instructor. His undergraduate degree came from a diploma mill. His degree sequence contradicts itself between his court record and his 1993 account. His claimed MIT date conflicts with his Los Alamos badge date. His claimed Caltech date conflicts with his Las Vegas residency records. In 35 years, not one classmate or professor from either school has come forward. Those aren't missing records, they're verifiable lies. We score this as inconsistent with whistleblower, consistent with fabricator, and consistent with disinformation. The credentials damage Lazar, but they don't finish him. He still described element 115 and a space-time warping propulsion system in 1989. Scientific claims that appear to be ahead of their time. Where Lazar acquired that knowledge is the next question. Episode 3 answers it. I'm your host, James Carrion. This is the Circle Jerk. Stay analytical.